John Jones or GSP for the UFC all-time GOAT? Has he finally surpassed George St. Pierre? I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I do not know. I go back and forth on this because I am a George St. Pierre guy and I understand just how great George St. Pierre is. However, what John Jones just did at UFC 309 against Stipe was absolutely incredible. Nobody does that to Stipe. A lot of haters out there want to say that Stipe was old and things like that. That's not true. Randy Couture won a title at 46 years old in the heavyweight division. That right there debunks your too old theory. John Jones made Stipe look bad, okay? Stipe is not bad. He was made to look bad by John Jones. The GOAT, arguably. George St. Pierre, if you look at resume, I think you still got to give it to George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre beat legends in his own right, too. He beat Matt Hughes when Matt Hughes was considered the all-time welterweight GOAT. He beat him twice, 2 out of 3. Also beat BJ Penn. BJ Penn was considered a legend that was transcending weight classes and, doing his damn thing. 2-weight champion, beat Matt Hughes, beat, everybody there was at lightweight too, beat BJ Penn was that guy. And George beat him twice. Okay, George beat him twice. You want to talk about the failed tests for John Jones? You could do that. But you could also talk about the Johnny Hendricks fight for George St. Pierre. And for the longest time, I've denied it. For the longest time, I think I only really watched the fight once for real, as like a young kid that was like a GSP fan, and I kind of just put it away. George St. Pierre got his hand raised, and I went, and moved on. I locked it away. But I rewatched it the other day, and I was looking at it, and I was like, man, those knees, they were something. I remember when he was throwing those knees, and you know what? Looking back on it, I would like to see people implement those knees now. I don't think anybody talks about those knees enough. We don't see that level of clinch work in the UFC too often. Johnny Hendricks was so strong in there against George St. Pierre, constantly pushing GSP's back to the fence. I mean, Johnny definitely slowed down in the later rounds, but Johnny was putting a beating on George those first 2 rounds, man. He was putting a beating on George. And George righted the ship in the 3rd round. I thought that was his best round in the round that he won, but then I think he got to look at rounds 4 and 5 rather, and maybe if you really want to be generous, you can give round 5 to George, but if you do, you can't give him a 3rd. You can't give George 3 out of those 5 rounds. You just can't do it, and you got to bring that up. You also have to talk about Greasegate. Not for nothing, but people don't talk about Greasegate. And I kind of think it's negligible. I do brush it off to the side, but, right, if we're advocating, devil's advocate for one John Jones, you gotta call out everybody's ineptitudes and shortcomings, John Jones beat a lot of legends, a lot of established guys that have won the belt before, right? Rampage Jackson, Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, Shogun. John Jones beat the who's who, man. But those guys were not as hungry as the guys that George St. Pierre was fighting, right? Those guys had already been there and done that in terms of a UFC title win. Those guys have already established their names and are legends of the sport, Whereas Josh Koscheck, he wasn't. Carlos Condit, he wasn't. Nick Diaz, he wasn't. Jake Shields, he wasn't. Thiago Alvarez, man, do me a favor. Go look at Thiago Alvarez's fights before he fought George. Look at his record and the record of his opponents he was fighting. Like, Thiago Alvarez was a destroyer, and George St. Pierre beat it out of him. Same with John Fitch. Look at John Fitch. Look at who he beat, how he beat them. Yeah, he just wet blanketed them and controlled them. But you know what? He really controlled these guys, dude. You couldn't. John Fitch was a different kind of wrestler. And George St. Pierre just destroyed him, obliterated him. Never the same after. Neither was T.I. Like, people weren't the same, bro, after fighting George St. Pierre. However, and this is part of why I like doing these videos, is because I start talking about the topic and I start thinking out loud, essentially, to you guys. John Jones, Dominic Reyes was that hungry contender. Thiago Santos was that hungry contender. So not only did John Jones beat well-established guys, but John Jones beat those hungry contenders as well. You know, Alexander Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira. These guys were hungry contenders. They weren't, you know, already had been UFC champ before, already been to the top of the mountain before, you know, not as motivated kind of a thing. Not the case. The more I go back and forth on it, it's hard for me to make a case for GSP now, man. Like, what John Jones did at heavyweight against Stipe, in my opinion, is just special. It's something that MMA fans will remember for the rest of their lives. That spinning back kick puts down anyone, including Tom Aspinall. So I don't know where I officially land on this. I think I'm leaning towards John Jones. And when it's all said and done, I most likely will think it is John Jones. Also, you got to look at dominance too, right? I mean, John Jones does have some decisions on there, but his finishes over who he finished, you know, the oh my God, the violence that this guy, the ground and pound that he creates, you do not want this man on top of you, bro. His ground and pound is devastating. And you saw it against Stipe. You saw it against Alexander Gustafsson. You saw it against Daniel Cormier when he got dropped from the head kick. Like, John is dangerous, bro. John is really dangerous. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Whether you agree with me, disagree with me, it does not matter. Just join the discussion, follow for more, and leave a like if you enjoyed the time spent. Thank you. You are all appreciated.